So, again, I want to just take a minute and step back, because I think as we've been having these movement building conversations, this sense about, and I'm going to try and shift the conversation a little bit from specifically the things that you guys are doing to let's start talking a little bit about what it really means in society, where we live in a society that allows certain groups of individuals to be systematically targeted for either censure, discrimination, humiliation, or relegated to second-class citizens in a variety of ways. And so as we start thinking about this next part of the conversation, aren't you glad I said this all to you? Really is to think about moving out of our communities and out of our issues and into kind of this larger question about how do we start bringing together the various work that you're doing, organizing, the various work that you're doing together, organizing, the various work that we all need to do about creating the Minnesota we want. So what do you guys kind of imagine as we start thinking about that work? What's coming forward in all of your work, and how do you relate to that?
I think it's an opportunity for all of us as Minnesotans and as people in this country to really consider what role the media plays. And when we talk about public airwaves, is it really public? Are the things that we're hearing and seeing on television and on the radio representative of our values? And if it's not, what do we do to reverse that, to make sure that the people who are reporting or presenting information through those public airwaves are really representative of what we all believe in? One of the interesting things that CAR did during our campaign in holding KDW accountable is we did a search of their public inspection files. So I don't know if very few people are aware of it, but every radio station and every television station, as long as they have an FCC license to operate, must keep a public inspection file. That includes any complaints or comments they get on programming that they air. And you, as a person of this country, you have a right to go inspect that during business hours. Nobody knows that. And nobody goes and checks. I mean, it could just be a curiosity thing. If you're driving around KW's headquarters, don't just stop in St. Louis Park and look at the public inspection file. Right now, one of the big debates is that the broadcasters are saying nobody comes to look at those darn things, so we should do away with them. And so the Office of Management and Budget in DC, now they're trying to figure out whether they should just do away with the public inspection file. That's going to mean that any complaints that we have about the programming that is aired on radio and television, nobody's going to care anymore. Nobody's going to keep a record of it. That's not going to be information that the FCC looks at when they're looking at renewals of these licenses. That's something that people need to be aware of, is you need to be aware of the fact that these things exist. You should take advantage of the right that you have to review those files. I think there's also an opportunity, besides media and racism, media racism, but also to look at racism in general. How do we feel about our neighbors? What do we know about them? What are we going to do so that we become educated about how structural racism impacts our friends and our neighbors and ourselves? And also, in our campaign, most of the folks who were adamantly opposed to our campaign were actually Hmong Americans, people who were targets of this song. We need to learn about our own cultural history, our own, where did our ancestors come from? What's the history of our people? And how did we get here? I think that's an opportunity for us to really look inside and have those important conversations across the dinner table. We normally don't have those kind of conversations in our family about racism. How do you feel about that? And it's an opportunity for us to take advantage of that chance.
We've thrown out these kind of really important, essential conversations and opportunities, really, for people to. One of the ways I've been thinking about this is this sense of community being. That community is really two words. There's kind of the commons part. What do we share? What are the values that we share? What do we believe together? And then the unity part, which is what are we willing to work on together? And it's really a marrying of those two things together. But so maybe that's another place we can go to. Is to talk about, so how do you talk about some of these really, I mean, racism is a very difficult thing to talk about for a number of people. It's particularly, I think, challenging to talk about across different groups. So what, for our audience and for the lovely podcast. What maybe are a couple things to talk about there, and I'll give you a minute to think about it, because I know I didn't send any of this to you. And the same for you, Monica. But you know, as we think about it, it's not only about this sense of homophobia, it's also this sense of how we've othered ourselves as internalized, and how we've othered others. So.
Well, Cara's been really intentional about, and I hate the word inclusive because it could be bad and good, but we try to really engage, maybe that's a better word, people who have opposing viewpoints. So, you know, if you go on our Facebook, you'll see conversations from people who say, you know, from Hmong Americans who just say, oh, you're terrible, what are you doing? You're making us look terrible. You're being dramatic about it. And for us, it's an opportunity for us to talk to those people. So how did you reach those conclusions? Why do you feel that way? So it's reaching out and having conversations, even ones where, you know, you might at first want to be able to brush them off and say, you don't know what you're talking about, go away. Our work and our campaign is not about you. If you don't believe in it, you should go away. We have to take a step back and say, well, why does that person feel that way? What is it in their background? Or what did they experience that made them feel that way? So I think the onus is on all of us to have those conversations and to really be open-minded, because we have to, in order for the movement to happen, we have to make ourselves more open to differing viewpoints, and oftentimes that means viewpoints that are opposite of ours. And I think the movement can only be enriched by having that sort of knowledge of what are people feeling who don't believe in this. And in a way, it helps us with our own messaging. How do we get them to understand us? So we won't have that sort of insight if we don't have those conversations, if we're not open to having those kinds of conversations with these people.
So, you know, after we get through this little round, I think this idea of framing is an important one. But have you guys talked a little bit? Because I think your car is unique in the sense that the generational piece. So again, I mean, this is also for me, just personally as an observer, you know, in this. It's interesting because this is also, it's this, as you talked about, it's the second generation folks that are here that have a very different sense of what racism looks like here than their parents. And I think that's just a fascinating, and maybe just a couple of minutes on any conversations that you've had there. So I think it's also helpful for other communities as they're looking at, regardless of how long we've been here, oftentimes Minnesota is seen as the United States is seen as a place where immigrants come, and there's a unique phenomenon that happens as, you know, for the first generation, and then subsequent generations. And I don't know, what sort of things you guys talked about that? It's interesting.
So the relationship with the elders was really through the Hmong 18 Clan Council. So in the Hmong culture, there's a clan system. There's 18 different clans, and so each clan has a sort of a leader that's assigned to sit on the board of the 18 Clan Council. So our relationship with the elders was actually really through that council. They have a lot of power, and they also have the ability to communicate information to people really fast, especially people who are not my generation, so my parents' generation, my grandparents' generation. So for us, it was an opportunity for us to listen to them about why this issue was so important to them. Hearing their stories of the pain of running through the jungles during the Vietnam War, losing their home, their belongings, their family members, their friends, watching people get killed as they try to cross the river, what life was like in the camps in Thailand. And why this issue matters to them, because of the sacrifices that they've made to come to this country, to really then also struggle in this country, to make a living, to survive. Those are the things that we can't just dismiss, because these are real experiences of my parents, my grandparents, and it really opened our eyes to understanding why it's important for us to have the opportunity to say when something is not right. So when we see racism, to stand up and say, no, because our parents have been through this, and we've also been through this as well in our own lives. And so for the elders to be able to take on this issue with us and say, we believe that there's an opportunity for us to educate people, remind people that it's not easy to be a person of color, to be a Hmong American, to be a war-torn refugee coming here, and the struggles that we faced.